What do you do when the thing in front of you matters, but you have no motivation? You know you should begin. You know the work is important. Maybe it is your health, your job, your family, your future. Or maybe it is simply getting through one more difficult day without falling apart. But inside, there is no fire, no excitement, no energy, only a quiet heaviness. And when motivation disappears, many people think something is wrong with them. But an old Buddhist-inspired story teaches a different lesson. Maybe motivation is not the beginning of the path. Maybe it is something you meet only after you begin walking. There was once a young monk who lived in a quiet monastery near the edge of a mountain forest. Every morning, the monks woke before sunrise. They swept the courtyard. They carried water. They prepared food. They studied. They meditated. They served the people who came to them with grief, anger, and confusion. But this young monk struggled, not because he was bad, not because he was lazy, but because every task felt heavier than it looked. When he saw the older monks walking calmly through their duties, he felt ashamed. They seemed peaceful. He felt restless. They seemed disciplined. He felt broken. Each night, he promised himself, "Tomorrow, I will do better." And each morning, when the bell rang, his body felt like stone. One day, the teacher asked him to carry water from the river to the monastery garden. It was a simple task. 2 buckets, 1 path, 1 garden. But the road was steep, the sun was hot, and the monk's mind was full of resistance. After only a short distance, he stopped. He looked at the mountain path ahead and whispered, "I cannot do this." He returned to the monastery with empty buckets. The next day, he tried again. Again, he stopped. Again, he returned empty. By the 3rd day, he no longer wanted to try. He went to his teacher and bowed his head. "Master," he said, "I do not have the motivation for this life. I want to be disciplined, but my heart is weak. I wait for strength, but it never comes." The old teacher looked at him gently. Then he picked up a small wooden bowl. Not a bucket, not a jar, just a bowl. He placed it in the young monk's hands and said, "Then do not carry the river. Carry this." The young monk stared at the bowl. It seemed too small, almost useless. "How can this water help the garden?" he asked. The teacher smiled. "Today, do not think about the garden. Do not think about the whole path. Do not think about becoming disciplined. Walk to the river. Fill the bowl. Bring it back." The monk wanted to argue. A bowl of water would not change anything. It would not fill the garden. It would not prove his strength. It would not make him feel inspired. But the teacher said nothing more. So the young monk walked. The bowl was light. The path was still steep. The sun was still hot. His mind still complained. But this time, the task was small enough that he could not honestly say it was impossible. He reached the river, filled the bowl, returned to the monastery, and poured the water onto one dry plant. Then the teacher said, "Good. Tomorrow, do the same." For many days, the young monk carried 1 bowl of water. At first, he felt foolish. Other monks carried full buckets. He carried a bowl. Other monks seemed strong. He felt embarrassed. But slowly, something changed. He stopped asking, "Do I feel motivated?" He began asking, "Can I carry 1 bowl?" And the answer was usually yes. On some days, he carried 1 bowl. On better days, he carried 2. Sometimes, when the morning was cool and his mind was clear, he carried a small bucket. But when his motivation disappeared again, he did not quit. He returned to the bowl. This was the first lesson. When the mind is overwhelmed, The task must become smaller, not because you are weak, but because a small step keeps the path alive. After several weeks, the garden began to change. The dry leaves softened. The soil darkened. Small green shoots appeared near the stones. The young monk was surprised. He had never felt a great wave of motivation. He had never woken up transformed. No lightning had struck his heart. But the garden was alive. One evening, he stood beside the plants and finally understood. He had been waiting to feel like a disciplined person before acting with discipline. He had been waiting to feel peaceful before practicing peace. He had been waiting to feel ready before beginning. But readiness had not come first. The action came first. The feeling followed later, quietly, slowly, like water entering dry earth. This story matters because many of us live like that young monk. We stand at the bottom of the mountain and stare at the whole path. We think about the entire project, the entire healing process, the entire body we want to rebuild, the entire career we want to change, the entire apology we need to make, the entire room we need to clean, the entire life we feel we have fallen behind in. And because the whole thing feels too big, we do nothing. Then we blame ourselves. We say, "I have no discipline." But sometimes the problem is not your character. Sometimes the problem is that you are trying to emotionally lift the whole mountain. Buddhist wisdom often brings us back to the present moment, not because the future does not matter, but because the only place you can place your foot is here. Not tomorrow, not next year. Here, this breath, this action, this bowl of water. So when you have zero motivation, try this. First, lower the size of the task until it becomes honest. Not impressive, honest. If you cannot write for 1 hour, write 1 sentence. If you cannot exercise, put on your shoes and walk for 2 minutes. If you cannot clean the whole room, clear 1 corner. If you cannot forgive yet, begin by not feeding the anger for 1 breath. Second, separate action from emotion. You do not need to feel calm to take a calm step. You do not need to feel confident to do the next right thing. You do not need to feel motivated to begin. Third, return without drama. This is important. When you fail for 1 day, do not turn it into a story about your whole identity. Just return to the bowl. The path is not destroyed because you stopped walking. The path is waiting. There is a quiet kindness in this lesson. It does not shame you. It does not shout at you. It does not say, "Become stronger immediately." It says, "Begin smaller." Because hard things are not always conquered by force. Sometimes they are softened by repetition. Sometimes courage does not look like fire. Sometimes courage looks like washing 1 dish, opening 1 document, taking 1 breath before replying in anger, going to sleep instead of punishing yourself with thoughts, carrying 1 small bowl of water when the whole garden feels impossible. So today, do not ask yourself, "How do I fix my whole life?" Ask a gentler question. What is my bowl of water? What is the smallest step that keeps the path alive? Do that, not because it is impressive, but because it is real. And tomorrow, return again. If this story brought you a little peace, subscribe for more calm, Buddhist-inspired stories and life lessons. And in the comments, write 1 small step you are willing to take today. Maybe someone else needs to see that they are not walking alone.